This is MIP. Get woke.
Good morning, everyone. 25 minutes before the hour, once again, we're going to depart from some of the political news of the day to talk about beauty. Think we can do that? Why don't we? And this is about an historic figure, but we're also joined by an historic guest, one who's authored a book about this historic figure, and she's historic by virtue not only of her work but of her title. She is the president of Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, and she is the author of An American Odyssey, the life and work of Romare Bearden. Dr. Mary Schmidt Campbell joins us now. Dr. Campbell, good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, it's meaningful to me, when we talk about people in academia and college presidents. It's not too often that you find a college president who is an art scholar. So that's unique and extraordinary unto itself. A lot of college presidents write books about a whole lot of different other subjects, but I can't recall one that's written one about art. This is a beautiful thing to me.
Oh, thank you. Well, art has been a part of my life my entire life, so it just came naturally to me.
So you actually met Romare Bearden?
Yes, I did. I was a graduate student, and my teacher said to me, "You have to go see this African-American artist. He's incredible." And she gave me this catalog from his retrospective back in 1971 from the Museum of Modern Art. And I opened it up, and it was like opening up a treasure trove. I mean, it was just beautiful images of Black people, one after another. So I went to New York to go see his artwork. And I looked at the show, and the show was just dazzling. And my husband and I left the show and said, we're going to go find some more images of this artist. And so we went to all these major museums in New York City, and we could not find one other example of his work.
Mm-hmm.
So my husband said, look, let's just call him on the phone. And this is back in the days where payphones were on the street.
Yeah.
And so I picked up the phone and looked in the phone book, and there was his address and his telephone number. So I called him. And he invited us to come over, just like that. And that's how it started.
And, that's the thing about Romare Bearden, as I began to learn about him and understand him, his work, by the time I realized who he was, he was already legendary. And then
Right.
I go back and find that he was just as accessible as you described. He was a pretty regular guy walking around New York.
Right. In fact, for 30 years of his life, he held a full-time job. So he'd go to work, and he was a caseworker.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd go in the Department of Welfare. He'd go to work from 9 to 5 every day, and then he'd come home, and he'd do his artwork at night.
Wow. Describe for our audience, from your point of view, just how unique and extraordinary his style of art is.
Well, one of the things I think is most striking about him is that he comes from his art from a point of view of we as a people have a rich cultural heritage, and he's able to visualize it. He's able to make us see how a baptism is connected to an ancient rite, or when two people meet in a courtyard, it's the same as two women meeting in a 17th century Dutch courtyard. Or he's able to also show that, all of us have multiple identities. We're many things all at once.
Right.
And using collage, he's able to communicate that. So he makes Black people rich and complicated and full of history.
And he did this a great deal, if not primarily through collage, didn't he?
Well, he came to collage very late in life. He tried out a lot of different ways of being an artist. And finally, when he was actually in his mid-50s, he began to exhibit his collages publicly, and his collages were explosive. They just took off.
Yeah, they were quite beautiful. So talk to us about how he became an artist. What was it about his experience that made him, in his life, his early life, that inspired him to become a visual artist?
We know what's fascinating about Bearden is that his life spans almost the entire 20th century. He was born in 1911, and he died in 1988.
Mm-hmm.
And even with that, he was born into the home of his great-grandparents who were emancipated slaves. So in a sense, he had an experience of blackness that went back to slavery,
mm-hmm.
right? And so his parents took him up to Harlem when he was a child, and he grew up in the middle of the New Negro movement, and his mother was the centerpiece of that movement. So in his household, he had people like Marcus Garvey and W.B. Du Bois and Paul Robeson
Wow.
and Langston Hughes. And, all these incredible figures just were in his living room.
Mm-hmm.
So, and at night, when he finished work, he could hang out in the cabarets in Harlem so he could hear the best music in the world. He could listen to Count Basie and Louis Armstrong and Fletcher Henderson. So he had this amazing upbringing that was so rich. And artists like Jacob Lawrence were he hung out with, his cousin Charles Alston. So he had all of these people surrounding him. This man had an amazing education as a young artist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He was able to inhale all of that greatness.
Inhale all that greatness. He was what we would call a race man.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he first started out as an artist, he started out as a political cartoonist. And he took on all the tough issues of the day. He did cartoons against the Ku Klux Klan. He did cartoons that challenged whether or not black people should be enlisting in the Army with the war coming up on the horizon. He was in support of the Scottsboro Boys. I mean, he was so unabashedly pro-black in his youth. And then he went through a change. He went to the Army, and he came out, and he had completely shed all of the black subject matter and decided, I'm just going to be an artist, and did abstract work for almost 20 years of his life. So it was interesting to see him grapple with race and where race, came into play in his art.
Mm-hmm. Where were the political cartoons published?
In the black press, and that's something that is important for us to remember. The black press was extraordinary in the 20s and 30s. So Crisis magazine, that was edited for a long time by W.B. Du Bois, always had visual images. It had cartoons, it had photographs, it had sketches, because he understood that visual representation was part of how we communicate our ideas and our consciousness. So the Crisis was one place. The Baltimore Afro-American had, at one point, had a readership that exceeded the readership of the New York Times, because that's how black people got their news, through reading a newspaper and then passing it on to a friend who passed it on to another friend. And so there was huge circulation for the black press. And his mother was a correspondent for the Chicago Defender, another huge newspaper.
Yeah. Again, his experience was unavoidable. He was just surrounded.
He was saturated.
Yeah, and growing up at the right time.
Blackness.
Right. So you said when he joined, I want to be sure I understand you correctly. And folks, Mary Schmidt Campbell, the president of Spelman College, we're talking about the book, Quarter Before the Hour, An American Odyssey, The Life and Work of Romare Bearden. And to those of you who are watching our stream On Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, Make It Plain, and on Instagram, Minister with 2 T's. I have sort of a slideshow going of some of Romare Bearden's works, so you all can see them for yourselves, those of you who've not seen them. And in these moments of political upheaval in our country, there's some beautiful things to see. So take a little break from that and take a look if you don't mind. And it's a great book as well. We encourage people to read it and buy it. You mentioned that he joined the Army, and then after that, did you say he no longer wanted to be a race man?
He never ever denied his race, but he thought that as an artist, his race got in the way of his being an artist. And let me explain that.
Okay.
He was really troubled by all the caricatures and stereotypes that demean Black people. And part of the book, an important part of the book, is to look at the way American visual culture has used visual images to undermine our legitimacy as citizens. Mm-hmm. So you take something like Birth of a Nation. The first blockbuster film in 1915 that came out was a film that was all about how the Ku Klux Klan were the salvation of this country and how Black people were a threat to this country. Mm-hmm. Now, that film was responsible for the revitalization of the Klan after 1915, using visual images. And Bearden alludes to that in an essay that he writes about just after he got out of the Army, where he talks about how all these images kind of prevent people from seeing Black people as they really are, and they prevent artists from being able to represent Blackness in a way that is able to overcome these negative images. So he decides, I'm not going to deal with it at all. I'm just going to do abstraction so people can see me as an artist. And that was how he thought he was going to solve the problem of race and art.
Yeah, yeah. Would I be incorrect, Professor, if I were to say that even in his abstractions, to me, I see still a great deal of race consciousness?
Absolutely. I mean, the first series he does is The Passion of Christ, right? And even in his letters, he says that the struggles of Christ are very much like the struggles of a Black man. Mm-hmm. So he was even in the abstractions, he was seeing metaphors and images that could represent the condition of Black people in this country.
Yeah, absolutely, and so beautifully and meaningfully portrayed, folks. You can't miss it at all. Did he ever receive, in terms of the, I guess for lack of a better word, the mainstream artistic community, did he ever receive, in your view, Madam President, the recognition and the credit and acknowledgement he truly deserved?
Eventually, yes. I would have to say that. I mean, after he started doing collages, he got his first retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, which is probably the most important museum of modern art in the world. He went on to receive the Medal of National Medal of Freedom from Ronald Reagan, of all people, before he died.
Right.
And he is probably in every major collection of every major museum in the country, and frankly around the world as well. And we're still seeing major exhibitions of his work. The High Museum down here in Atlanta is going to do an exhibition of all his autobiographical series. So I would say yes, but most importantly, and this is really important, the Studio Museum in Harlem did a 2-year exhibition of Bearden's influence on other artists, and it is profound. And that's, for me, one of the most important ways that you measure an artist's value. and that is what an artist says to another artist, because other artists keep that artist's work and ideas alive. And he's had a powerful influence on artists, black and white, in all kinds of mediums. So I would say yes, eventually he has received his due. And I hope the book is part of receiving that due.
Yeah, no, it's high time. I congratulate you on the book. And as a matter of fact, folks, what I do want to mention, not only is she the president of Spelman College, she was herself the executive director of the Studio Museum in Harlem from 77 to 87, New York City's Commissioner of Cultural Affairs from 87 to 91. My guest was Dean Emerita of the Tisch School of the Arts here at New York University and vice chair of the President's Committee on the Arts and Humanities during Barack Obama's administration. Again, it's very interesting to me to have someone of your experience in a college presidency. But welcome. I confess to you, I grew up on the campus of Fisk University. My mom,
oh, lucky you.
my mom worked at Fisk for 30 years. And you know what, President Campbell, I was always moved whenever I would go visit her at work. She worked in the president's office. And as you know, when you go into the Cravath Hall, where the president administration building, and they have those Aaron Douglas originals on those walls. They're still there today. And so, myself, I was unable to escape, even though I never became an artist, I was unable to escape an appreciation from just seeing that every single day. And so I saw that, and then later on I saw this guy named Romare Bearden, and I said, hey, it was a little bit, it reminded me a little bit, not quite the same, but still.
Well, no, it should have reminded you, because Aaron Douglas was one of his most important mentors. And
makes sense.
Aaron, he used to call him the dean, because he was the pioneer. He did those wonderful murals, aspects of Negro life.
Yeah.
In 1934, Bearden was still an undergraduate at NYU, and he set the pace. He set the standard, because he was thinking in big, epic terms of a history, that went back, to the continent, and he saw the sweep of African American history, and he was able to represent it in these beautiful murals. And then went to Fisk and was the head of the art department for many years.
That's
there.
right.
So
That's right.
Douglas was an important influence and important teacher for Romare Bearden. Yeah.
Yeah. When I was always inspired by that, and I went to visit back in February. They had me back for a speaking engagement. It was just, inspiring to see again, as is Romare. I also want to point out, I was taking my son on the subway to baseball practice in a field we'd never been to, and in New York. And on the way to practice, I gave my son a bit of a lesson, because at the subway stop where we were was a Romare Bearden stained glass. It was, I think it's the East Tremont subway.
Oh, East Tremont subway station.
Yes. And I had to stop and say, I said, Minraj, I'm going to tell you who this is. And we stopped and took pictures of it. And it was just a pleasant surprise to see City of Glass. And, there are a few artistic works in the New York subways, y'all. The subways ain't all messed up. But if you want to just go see some beautiful art, and there are others, don't get me wrong, but other artists. But Romare Bearden's at the East Tremont station, President Campbell.
That's right. He is. And it's so beautiful because it kind of takes you by surprise. And it's stained glass, so it reminds you of a church or a cathedral or something. Yeah. And they are just so beautiful. Yeah. Oh, how wonderful! You're speaking of baseball. You know that Romare Bearden was a great baseball player when he was in college.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, in fact, he played. He was on the varsity team at Boston University, and he would play with the Boston Tigers, which was part of the Negro Leagues, as they called them in those days.
Wow!
And he was good enough that he was playing one summer, and some pro scouts saw him and offered him a position if he would pass for white. And he said, absolutely not.
Is that right? You know what year that was?
It's in the book.
Wow. And folks, his stock just went up even more in my book. That's great. Because we're big baseball folks. Well, I have to remember that to my son when we go to the wild card game tomorrow night in Yankee Stadium, and tell him that story as well. Well, that's a wonderful story, folks. Be sure to check out An American Odyssey. Here's the book right here, so you can see it. The life and work of Romare Bearden. It's I love the cover picture too, because he's standing in front of the Apollo Theater.
Right.
What can be a more iconic?
His studio was over the Apollo Theater.
Yes. Outstanding. An American Odyssey, the life and work of Romare. Lastly, how things at Spelman?
Oh, Spelman is a miracle. Spelman is an incredible place. Do you know that we produce more Black women who finish their PhDs in STEM fields than any other college or university in the country?
Wow. Outstanding. Black girl magic.
Black girl magic.
Well, congratulations to you. Spelman is blessed to have you. What a wonderful book, and what beauty you have brought us this morning. Professor Mary Schmidt Campbell, President Mary Schmidt Campbell, An American Odyssey, the life and work of Romare Bearden. Everybody be sure to check it out. All right. Thank you, President Campbell.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Pleasure to meet you. Take care. God bless you now. All right. All right, folks, we'll get ready to take a break. We'll be right back. Sirius XM Progress 127. Resistance Radio. Get woke and vote. Withdraw Kavanaugh. Get ready for impeachment. This is MIP, Romare Bearden.